What? I want to mute. Hi, Ernie. You're muted. Hi, Mary.
How are you doing?
Good.
Good.
I read Chris Katuki's memo today. You're muted.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, we can't, it's not in the packet, so we don't really know it, but I'll speak to it when I'm talking about the mapping stuff. There's a piece of it that's nomenclature, like the word preferred has a particular meaning that you use differently, especially now with the new regulation. But it was accurate what I got out of his comments.
Yeah.
I didn't. So yeah, it's great. I mean, we'll put it in the packet for the next meeting, obviously.
Well, I mean, it was in the packet in that it was
Yeah,
corresponding.
yeah, the memo was back then, yeah. Here's our man, Stephen. And we just need our chair. I assume she is the
Hi.
one that bumped it to 7. Hi, Stephen. How you doing? We can hear you.
Good. Now I can hear you.
Yeah, there you go.
But do you want to?
I'm
Well,
not sure.
wait till we start saying something pithy, then he really will.
I'm going to say yes at the outset, but we'll see.
It varies. It varies across the night. Sometimes we're more happy to hear about it than others.
Mm.
Hope our chair didn't forget.
Now, here she is. All right. Now we have our fearless leader. We're ready to go. Not quite yet. That's a very good picture. It looks very professional, very high res. You're muted. You're muted.
I am. Hi. Yeah. No, I've been looking at myself on this stupid background for way too many hours today.
Yeah.
What is Spencer Stewart?
It's an executive search firm. Headhunter.
Ah.
So
let's see. I just have one Zoom question on participants. Jade, I'm pretty sure is
that's
yeah.
Annette.
Yeah. And now, so I have somebody, Paul. Okay, there we go. Thank you. Just need to know who we are. Nobody's gonna Zoom bomb a solar sighting meeting, but you never know.
Never know. You guys, has anyone in Norwich experienced that?
Oh, I believe so. That's why the
Okay.
select board, if you hear them at the beginning of their meetings, they used to give this long spiel about why
Having-
they played by those rules. And I think it was because they got bombed at one point.
Yeah. The select board in Ferrisburg got bombed, and it was quite a thing. Like flat out panic. They just shut the Zoom down. No one knew what to do. It was like loud music, pornography.
Oh, yeah, well, that's a good
It was-
decision then to shut it
Yeah.
down.
Yeah, close down the windows. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
So,
right. Well, we're recording, Mary, so you're free
great, okay,
to
so,
jump in.
so just approve the agenda, I guess is the first item. We have a lot on this agenda. I don't know
Yeah,
that we'll get to
yeah.
everything, but
So I would move to approve the agenda as written.
And I'll second it.
Just
okay.
one point of discussion. There was an email that was circulated to, I think, a few of you today.
Yeah,
If we'd like to converse about that,
we can't. It's not in the packet. It didn't make the packet, so it is officially not part of this meeting.
That's the one from the, yeah, the one from Chris.
Kaczynski. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, we can acknowledge that we received it and it'll be in the packet for the next meeting, but in terms of discussing the content, we can't assume that anybody, well, we can assume that other people haven't seen it. And so it's not part of the packet. But to be
It'll get put in.
clear, the memo that he copied, that he attached to it, has been sent to us previously and was in a previous packet. So and I think that contains all the content of what he had in the cover letter. So it is kind of part of the conversation from that.
so any public comment for items not on the agenda?
Okay.
Okay, so correspondence, we've got a couple of letters back and forth with Peg Marins. Peg, I asked her, encouraged her to come today, and she wasn't able to. But I don't know if there's any discussion about her letters. I am going to talk with her and just at least let her know that at this point we have a fairly narrow view of how we're looking at doing edits to the town plan, and thinking about how the issue she raises in terms of how do we think about ag lands is kind of beyond the scope, at least at this point, I think, of what we're doing.
And
So-
ag lands are protected by state law. I mean, whatever criteria we come up with, and I'll talk about it when I'm talking about the mapping exercise, we have to take into account prime ag, and it will have constraints on it because it's prime ag. So that is definitely included and protected to some degree.
So I'll talk with her more and see if I can better understand what the concerns are. But it seems, at least my reading of it is that she would like to see the town have to avoid placing solar arrays on farmlands and in forest blocks. I think our forest block protections are very strong. But there's certainly not, there's certainly many examples of solar panels on ag land throughout the state as people make that choice. And so, but at least for me, it seems like it's a little bit beyond where we want to go right now in terms of just trying to do very specific edits addressing on our way towards an energy plan. Anything else? Yeah, Paul.
Hi, could you just clarify there are, I don't know in the state how popular it is, but there's, in some states, it's not like an either or, but they do have agricultural agriculture and photovoltaics, on the same site. So,
Yeah.
they can coexist. So does that negate the use of solar panels and agricultural activity in Vermont? Can't they both coexist?
Look, this is yeah, go ahead, Ernie.
Well, I was going, if I can comment. If you look, it kind of depends whether they can coexist, and it depends on if actually people plan on them. There is a concept of what do they call it? Photo agriculture or something like that.
Yeah,
But the thing is, it requires planning that both things occur. And if you look at the sites that you can see, for instance, on the side of the highway, which is where I see where most of my observations are based on, there's no plan. There's no way you can squeeze in agriculture in between those panels. Maybe you could put chickens underneath them. That's about the size of it. But you couldn't grow anything. You couldn't have a sizable animal under those or anything like that. They're close to the ground. They're closely packed. That's just not a place you're going to put anything. You're not going to put heavy ag equipment nearby. There's all kinds of reasons you wouldn't do that. So you'd have to sort of make that a specific thing. One of the things I wanted to bring up myself, not as part of the public comments, so I'll bring it up later, is the number of when they talk about preferred sites, they're talking about the vast majority of what they consider a suitable preferred site is a brownfield. In other words, thing that's already been built on. So anyways, I will talk about that. Maybe we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, we will.
Okay. Yeah, Nat?
Yeah, the Climate Council's subcommittees are holding public hearings on various sections of the Climate Action Plan. And I just listened to a number of them yesterday, especially the agriculture one. And there was somebody from the Agency of Agriculture. I was going to put the link to the place in the chat because it's just a video, but you guys don't have a chat. I'll email it to you. Where he talks about the fact that they really have no role to play in the permitting of solar projects on ag soils. So while they may be listed as a constraint, there's absolutely no regulatory limitations on them. In Act 250, you have mitigation, and there's been discussion about whether it should be 2-to-1 or 1-to-1, but you have to pay if you're going to do something. But there's nothing like that in solar projects. And I found his comments to be very interesting because I'd never heard anyone articulate it before. But you do not see the Ag Agency doing anything other than if there are prime ag soils, they will ask that they be stockpiled and then returned after the project is over. And most soil scientists say that destroys the life of the soil. And in one project that is currently under review, they're actually planning to create berms out of the prime ag soils and plant trees in them, which some of the scientists have said is going to really destroy the function of the soil. So this is not an area yet that the state has grappled with.
All right, so moving along our agenda, there's nothing to do, no action to take there. So, we're at this point, this committee has talked a lot about the edits to the document. And then I think that right now we're at a point where we want to bring it out to the broader planning commission. And then beyond that to additional conversations as we think about whether or not, how to move it forward in this process of moving towards change. And so putting together a summary document I used as a, kind of the fundamental, the base of it, a document that Jan had written, but made some significant edits to it, really saying that, what we're trying to do is to be surgical in making changes so that we can better assess projects for PUC, and so that we can be on our road to setting up an energy plan for the town. And so just trying to summarize, the ultimate goal is to make changes to our allowed to plan to qualify as an enhanced energy plan. But right now we're focused on just aligning the town language with more regulatory use. That is very much the specific. We are not trying to do an overhaul to this plan because that is a much bigger project, which I think many of us think it needs to get done. But right now, just being surgical. And so because it hasn't been clear, and because that has led to many challenges, I think, for the town and for the people wanting to put solar arrays, and for the people who are concerned about them. So this is the document that sort of summarizes what we've done. Removal of the deferred preferred solar siting for most of the town area. That was that was something we wanted to say. I'm sorry, Mary, please.
Well, I can let you go through an iteration of what you've written, or I have about 6 points on this agenda item 4 I want to make, and I can wait until you're
Okay, well, you put your hand up, so
your
I thought you wanted to
presentation,
talk.
and then I'll make one because I have comments on a number of items in here.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
I have comments too. So if you
So why don't we?
then we can jump in.
Yeah. So well, why don't we jump in? Everybody can read it. I don't need to read it to you. Go ahead, Jan. As a member of the committee, why don't you speak first?
Yeah, what I did was go back through in detail all the changes, and we've got it in the summary, but I went through in detail, and I think my point here now, I wanted to speak kind of as an individual, how I felt about the proposed changes. It doesn't change necessarily what I think what we're proposing to the planning commission is for discussion. So
Right.
how I
Yeah.
feel about a particular change or line doesn't need to carry the day today. I may still say, fine, let's submit this to the group, but I just wanted to go through, it's maybe 3 items. And I think one of them is the slopes. And I think I mentioned it this last meeting, that if you look at our definition of development in the zoning regulations,
Zoning, yeah.
we've had a background desire here, or at least longer term plan, to say we want to have consistency across the regs. So if we use the word development and slopes for something in the plan, let's at least think we're going to do it in the zoning regs at some point. The word development is defined very broadly. It's basically, and I read it before, but it's everything you might do: erection, construction, reconstruction, conversion, enlargement, a sign, anything. So when we combine that word with a prohibit statement on slopes, so for example, a development shall not be permitted on slopes greater than 15 degrees in several places in our edited version. That's a very strong statement. Without, if it doesn't have a caveat of, unless they're mitigating engineering work done or whatever. So that to me is too restrictive. And again, some of these things we can either talk about them, or we can acknowledge my input and then roll it over to the big committee.
On that, would you feel more comfortable with a different number or more caveats? Because I think the caveats are what has gotten us into trouble. That, okay, well, unless it's A, B, C, D, and let's all agree that an engineer could put something up on anything. But we're talking about much more than what an engineer is able to physically do. And we were very much we've had in recent decisions that you've had, slopes have been, the vagueness of not having a number and having, just not having a number has
Yeah.
resulted in much consternation.
Yeah, so I understand that, and I wonder, so there are kind of two other things we could move. We could move the number, we could add caveats, or we could change the word development. But
Mhm.
that's my question to kind of the law. My understanding was you couldn't require something different about PV than you did about houses or something. If you said
Mhm.
you can't put a structure above the ridge line, you can't just narrowly make a rule for just PV as one type of development. Am I hearing that right? Or so we couldn't just change the word development to solar because that would run amok of some state reg. Annette, do you know a good answer for that?
Yes, you can't, your standards need to be the same. You can't present something that singles out one type of development. It has to be for the same. And in terms of the percentage, the Supreme Court decisions have said that if you just say steep slopes with no number, it's not regulatory. And if you do say slopes, then it is a percentage, it is regulatory. However, that definition of development is very important. So if you don't define development, does that, for instance, with solar just mean the footprint of the solar array, or does it mean everything, as you just stated? If it's defined in your zoning, maybe you need to move that into your plan. I like the idea of consistency.
Ernie.
Yeah, something I noticed when I was reading the changed guidelines and so on, they actually have a number of definitions to define, for instance, where the proper places are, and they define them, and they don't talk about the limitations or anything like that. They just say, for instance, a preferred site is a tract previously developed for other use and they simply say what it is. There's no caveats or anything like that. So when when you say defining, well, we should define it sort of the way the state uses the word definition as well. So then we also can then our plan or wherever we're talking about will line up a little bit more closely with the way the state is writing its law, and it'll make it easier to understand. And I think a definition is also a very simple way to explain something. A thing either is or is not something.
Not totally tracking you, Ernie, in terms of like, is this in response to the steep slopes or is this different from
Well,
that?
yeah. We can, if we say what steep slopes are, that's a good example. The
Yeah.
Supreme Court has said it's not regulatory if it doesn't specify what a steep
Right.
slope is. Okay, anything.
So we want to follow that, yeah.
Right,
We want
so
to follow that, yeah.
in the case of a preferred site, generally they're brownfields. They don't even say brownfields, they say the characteristics of a brownfield. So
Yeah.
the thing is defined as having these characteristics.
Yep.
Rather than saying caveats and saying if and the exceptions.
Mhm.
I mean, I
Okay.
think to my point at the beginning, I think it is perfectly valid for us to flag this as it goes to the full planning commission.
Yeah.
We could
Okay.
bounce it around for an hour and change
Right.
it to 20% and tweak the definition of development and then open it up to the larger group and start again.
See what they said, yeah.
I'm just flagging that. Me
Yep.
personally, I see that as restrictive. I understand the need for a number, and I understand we want to be consistent with our definition of development, and solar can't be special. But I would flag that as I know we're
Okay.
going to have to talk about it when we get to a bigger group.
Yes, I agree that we are gonna, we knew that we were gonna do that.
Yeah,
Anything else on this topic before, Jan, you go on your list? Annette, I don't know if Mary has
that's all I
anything.
had on, that's all I had on the slope one.
All right, well, why don't we just see if anyone else has anything on the slope one, so we can kind of take care of that now.
I wanted to
So,
flag the
oops,
Regional
Annette.
Planning Commission.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I don't know if you're aware that your regional plan is being updated.
Yes,
So I looked at the current plan and I looked at the draft plan. And there's no language in there on energy, but there is on Act 250. And it's just kind of, it's good information to see how the regional plan isn't doing anything regulatory. It's under, it says new housing projects subject to Act 250 must, so it uses must, minimize additional financial burden on municipalities and taxpayers by not locating on Class 4 roads, on steep slopes, or in remote areas. So my understanding is that that would not carry over on an appeal if somebody wanted to do something because it's not specified. So you might talk to the Regional Planning Commission about their lack of regulatory language when it has to do with something like steep slopes.
but so you're saying that language was for
It
housing,
was
not
for,
solar?
it's,
Act
they don't
250,
mention
not
steep
solar.
slopes they don't mention steep slopes very much. They do in the context of mining and then that one thing on housing. Something about architectural or archaeological historic sites also were sometimes next to steep slopes, but nothing on energy. But I'm I'm increasingly challenged by how to understand the role of plans, both regional and municipal, in the regulatory processes when the courts are saying they have to be so specific. Yet, so now's your opportunity to have your regional plan be consistent with your town plans.
Paul?
I am probably talking totally out of order. I know nothing, I'm not an engineer, but other parts of Vermont must kind of are probably confronted with deep slopes as we are. I
Yeah.
mean, isn't there some kind of a standard that, towns have to kind of, I mean, 15% here in Norwich is equal to 15% in Stowe. So what's acceptable and what's not acceptable? I mean, there must be some regional standards as to, for building on
It would
either.
be wonderful if there were, we have, if you go onto the solar site, Paul, we have gathered a lot of plans from a lot of different towns in the state, and you'll see that it varies. But I think you see 15%, and then in some you'll see 20 to 25. So there is variation in the different towns, but we have been, and we've invited people who've come to the meetings if there's a town plan that they really admire, think is done well, etc., to share it with us, and we'll post it and share it with folks. So it would seem that there could be, but there's no standardization. Okay. Jan, do you want to continue then? There's nothing more on
Sure.
slopes?
Yeah, the next one is sort of straightforward in that when we're talking about, it's on page 9, about future land use areas, but we just use the term industrial/energy area. Now, we can talk later when we're talking mapping,
Yeah.
whether we would choose to use a district to specify solar constraints or whatever. But I just think the terminology industrial/energy, you either could say, if you wanted to be calling out industrial energy projects, like large solar
Yeah.
projects as industrial energy, then get rid of the slash, get rid of the that. If you
Yeah.
put the slash in there,
like,
then it's
yeah.
one or the other. It's an industrial area or an energy area. If you put that in there, it's one or the other. And so we should either call it a renewable energy zone or an industrial zone that has certain rules associated. That's just a nomenclature wording thing, really.
We've struggled with this because we talked about, I mean, right now it's commercial and industrial, right? So commercial, industrial, and so it's like, okay, well, does energy belong, I mean, if you, I mean, putting a power site, if you're putting a power plant in, which you could argue it could be that would be, a reasonable place to put it in an industrial zone. So, but people didn't like it when it just said industrial, so they thought, well, maybe we say industrial and energy and make it kind of descriptive in the same way industrial and commercial. Commercial is not industrial, industrial is not commercial, so we can figure that out. Yeah, Mary.
I think unless you're talking about energy generation from like using coal or something where it requires a lot of infrastructure like water, wastewater processing, all of that, it doesn't make any sense at all to call a solar site an industrial site. These solar farms do not have wastewater treatment. They do not involve storage and transport of material, whether that's manufactured material or extracted material. They are really two different things. And I think you'll get yourself into trouble if you try to make it all one.
I would appreciate that. I would also just say as a point that I find it difficult to call a solar development a farm, because I do think that they're very different things. There's nothing about a solar development that is akin to a farm. So we'll have to find the right language. Ernie.
It's a field with things in it. There's no other infrastructure.
That's true. That it could be a field with infrastructure in it. Ernie.
Yeah, I mean, if you could actually have, it could be just like industrial, comma, commercial, comma, energy, comma, or solar energy. Either of those two terms depends on.
Yeah. To Mary's point, I think it is valid to recognize the difference between a PV array and other commercial, there's no traffic, it is different, and it's different in terms of what it takes from the land and what criteria you use. So it may turn out that it makes more sense to just call them out separately, that you're looking at what it needs and what impacts it has, and commercial development of should we put a Walmart on Route 5 South is a very different question than should we put even a big solar array in the same place. So they are different. We just have to be careful the wording doesn't say it wrong.
I agree.
So then the last thing I had looking through, and it's on the summary as well, was the 500 kW and over 500 kW and the definitive statement that it's not permitted. Because what I'm using, and I'll talk to this in the preamble to our mapping conversation, but what I got from our last meeting with the background of the changes made with the end of group net metering without, except where the load is, but the if anything, upping of the need for new renewable sites, that when you combine both of those, there is still pressure to build solar and reasons to build solar, but there is definitely going to be commercial pressure to build larger than 500. The 500 becomes a less important number limit because net metering isn't at play the same way. So when I looked at the mapping, just to cut to the chase, looking at the mapping, and to Ernie's point about brownfields, we have several gravel pits, former gravel pits, that are big enough to do more than 500 in. And so I wouldn't want to definitively prohibit that in the town of Norwich.
You would want to?
I would not want to. I would.
Okay. I'm just clarifying. I'm sorry, I didn't.
Yeah. I'm just saying that I think, given that new regulatory climate that basically makes the 500 kW cutoff less important, but still keeps you're still going to have developers trying to find places, at least in our region, that makes sense for a 1 or a 2 megawatt or whatever facility. And to the degree that Norwich might have a site that's viable, I wouldn't want to prohibit that.
Mary?
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. And I've been looking for balance all these months going through this because the Vermont has a goal of generating renewable energy with, with renewable resources as well as sort of restricting it. And most of the surgical approach that I've heard, especially for regulatory purposes, has been to restrict it. And so on this point, the size of the solar array, I wanted to insert that if you're going to restrict large ones, saying we're not going to have any of those, that on the homeowner scale, homeowners who own several acres and want to put solar, we have something in our town plan that says something like this: a town goal is to identify town goal is to so that property owner installations of solar generation below 15 kilowatt on their property are encouraged and must not be restricted by any consideration beyond the restrictions imposed by building new houses or whatever is on, the setback from the road, whatever already exists for that. There be no further restrictions so that homeowners are encouraged to do it. Not everyone can put it on their roof. Some are going to have it in their yard. Both of my neighbors have it in their yard. Causes me no heartache at all. But I think we need a statement in the town plan that says we encourage it and we're not going to overregulate it.
Thank you. I think on your initial comment about how it's gotten tighter, I agree with that. But I think that was almost necessary when you had a town plan, which essentially said most of the town, except for steep slopes and the village and the water, the shoreline, is really open game for creating for solar. And those are the only protected areas in the town. And then the planning commission gives permission to put solar arrays on even those areas that were supposed to be protected. So I do agree with you that this exercise has been one that has been more about restricting, because there was a really blank check in this town plan around where to put solar arrays. And so and again, the specific goal of this exercise is not to rewrite the whole town plan about what we should be doing, but is to be giving more direction to the town in the PUC process. And so that has been the focus of it. And so we have not been putting in something like, no restrictions by any restrictions. I can't imagine that we would say you could do any kind of development in any town without any regulatory review. Just doesn't make sense. Mary.
So I think that what we're trying to do is convey in our town plan to future people on the planning commission or whatever, that it's not random. Here's what we want as a town. And so we want to generate more electricity. For the homeowner small scale below 15 kilowatts, they can do whatever they want. Basically, you can add other words to it. But especially your current goal of surgical insertion of language that makes it more regulatory, I think that really you need to take the draft, whatever you end up with here, the draft before it goes to the planning board, send it to the energy committee. Norwich has an energy committee of experts who spent a long time thinking about this, so that they can look through your edits and they can add edits or they can revise edits. I think this is it's too far one direction without giving your experts a chance to really dive into it.
Thank you. Annette.
So I'm going to remind you of the purpose of these plans, and especially this language. the other day ran into some people in the town next to me, and they told me that their planning commission is working on an enhanced energy plan, and they're fighting over the inclusion of the word equity. And I said, it doesn't make any difference in terms of the PUC's process. You know, if you're trying to create a plan that helps guide developers to where you want development, then that's really all you're trying to do. And so, to Mary's point, residential solar projects under a certain size go through a very quick registration process. The only way anyone even knows about them is if they do a daily check of new cases in EPUC, where you might happen to see that your next door neighbor has registered one. And then the regulatory process is that you have to comment. I think it's within 15 days if you have any issues with it. And otherwise, unless there are some interconnection issues with the utility, it gets approved. So the language in the town plan is irrelevant. If you want your plan to be visionary, to send a message to the people who might be looking at living in Norwich, and invite that we encourage the use of residential solar as a located next to load, that's fine. But in terms of a regulatory standard, nobody cares. Sorry.
Well, there was a case, was it last year? You'd have to ask Linda's not on the call today, unfortunately, but where a homeowner was putting solar in on their property, and it went through, I don't know whether it was this committee or a different committee in the town. The homeowner didn't even realize that their installation was being scrutinized by some aspect of the town. So I would just defer that conversation to Linda Gray. She asked in one of these former meetings, did you ever tell the homeowner? And the answer was no. But I think we need to be explicit, because things like glare, who's worried about glare from a major solar installation? I think the citation of the glare issue came from a neighbor complaining about glare in some other town.
Glare can be a huge problem. I've seen it, and you do not want to have a neighbor with solar with glare. That's something that, and the bigger arrays, if you have the problem, there's really not a fix for it. But again, it's good to call it out. It's the same thing with housing developments. The Queechee analysis, that case in Act 250, all of that was about glare from windows. So glare is a very important issue to acknowledge. But again, I've been aware of two different solar projects, one in Bennington, I think, and one in Rupert, where glare was an issue on a residential basis. There may be others, but those get sorted out, however they get sorted out, neighbor to neighbor. And the PUC doesn't get involved in them. So I just want to remind you guys to keep the eye on the ball here if you're trying to get this thing done.
The PUC, this town plan affects people in the town, like neighbors and things. And there will be select boards in the future. Okay, so we should articulate what we're looking at. And for less than 15 kilowatts, homeowners should be able to do whatever they want.
I just don't think that the plan talks
just-
about the.
Yeah, just to point out, first of all, the town
zoning.
plan, town plan will do nothing to stop someone from putting a 15 kW system on. I guarantee that. The zoning regs won't either. And I don't know what, I can talk to Linda and see what that case was, because I would be very surprised if a board on this town was looking into a application that small. I did talk to Eric Wrench, who's the chair of the Energy Committee previously. He actually has experience installing solar projects where he was previously located. He made the point that in Norwich, not even the low-hanging fruit, but really the first and second tier of residential size, we have a very good build out of of residents people who want to have the percentage of houses that have 3, 5, 10 kW systems on the roof or in the lawn is quite high in Norwich compared to other towns. And there's some room to expand that, but we're actually in a pretty good place on that.
So, yeah, and I think when we get to the talk about mapping, let's come back to the 500 kilowatt. I think that
Yes.
from my perspective, after a lot of different conversations, I think if we can identify here are the 2 or 3 places where it could go, that's one thing. But I do think that we also have a lot of language in the town plan that talks about the character of the plan, the rural character of the plan, et cetera. And I think that we want to be careful, because in the last town plan never talked about projects this size. There were no kind of definitions about, are they allowed, where are they allowed, are they not allowed? It was absolutely silent to that. So so let's just kind of pause that.
It comes up in the mapping conversation.
So let's get there. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's all I had in terms of specific
Okay.
comments on the draft.
Mary, did you have other things you wanted to raise? You're on mute, Mary.
Sorry, thanks. Okay, I'll try to be quick. Focusing on the stated goal for regulatory use, this language, if you're, trying to regulate it, it should go through the Norwich Energy Committee. They should look at your draft changes. They should comment on it. They should recommend other changes. You should move on. I think that's a serious failure if you don't.
Mary, it's not a failure. The process that we have decided at the Planning Commission was that this is a subcommittee of the Planning Commission, that we're doing our work, we're posting everything, we're inviting people to the meetings, we're going to take it to the Planning Commission, and then that Planning Commission is going to then say, where do we want to get some more? So please don't describe it as a failure. It is a process that may be different from the process that you might have developed.
Okay, and okay, I think I would like to see things added, and maybe you'll get to this in mapping, that not only show, you've addressed all the places where it can't happen, where can it happen, and that be given special. So maybe you're coming to that.
Yep.
Yeah, that's exactly, I think, where we want to go, because, so much is theoretical, and then you need to say, all right, well, here are the maps. Here's where we can go, and let's do that. So we wanted to, so what I will do from this is make a couple of additional edits to the document based on this feedback. I'll think about this, kind of the industrial, commercial, and energy language. How do we get it so it doesn't provoke reactions? On the slope,
that one I think is just to acknowledge that solar has its unique land use requirements and impacts. And so to the degree it's the same or different, let's just name it correctly.
Yeah. Okay. And then, anyways, we'll make some additional edits and put it for the next Planning Commission meeting. Jan, do you want to talk about the mapping exercise? We talked about that in our last meeting and thought we would come back to it.
Yeah, so what I did is and I've been through this drill citing a lined landfill in the solid waste committee, the district solid waste committee. And so I'm well aware of the excitement that can be had from mapping exercises. And if you drop a map into a public forum, everybody finds their house, they immediately look around their house, and if they are mapped next to anything scary, like a landfill, for example, then, oh boy, we had like 100 people at a public hearing very quickly that had no interest whatsoever until the maps came out. So for that reason, even though I have a Google Earth map with a number of outlined areas on it, I'm not going to put that on the screen, and I chose not to put it in the packet. So what I would propose to do is step through the methodology, the criteria and the method that I used and the results in broad strokes, and then we can talk about what to do next. I think it's important to get some context before a map hits the Valley News because it gets really feisty quickly.
Agree.
Okay. So, and Annette, I'd like to get your confirmation that some of the criteria, I mentioned it a little before, but my read of the outcome from our last meeting in terms of the commercial and regulatory environment is accurate as much as we know. One point to start out with, and it actually is part of Chris Katuki's note that he sent, and I wrote back to him last night telling him that I was going to mention this. The word preferred is really not, I'm not looking for preferred sites here. I'm looking for prime sites. And it's the word preferred is now and should be, I think, reserved for a site that has been identified during a 45-day application period and reviewed, and the Planning Commission and the Select Board have said this is a preferred site. It's a very specific legal thing. So we are talking about prohibited, constrained, and prime areas for solar. And so that's just, so I'm going to try and avoid the word preferred. If it slips in out of habit, excuse me. I'm trying to map prime locations in town. So that's the first thing. And then I think what I said before about size is important, because what I got from that was 500 kW is less of an important benchmark because the group net metering goes away as an option. But because we upped the goal, or we increased the timing or the percentages of the goals for PV in Vermont, there are still going to be developers out there. There's still going to be incentives. There's still going to be utilities that are looking for getting the numbers. So there's still essentially, and I don't say this as a negative, a pressure for PV to get built. But the 500 is not is now, there's a developer can walk in tomorrow and try and build a 1 or a 2 or 3 megawatt array in Norwich, and that exists, and we want to be talking about it. They didn't remove the desire. They didn't remove the possibility of having a 1 megawatt array when the group net metering went away. Is that true, Annette?
So, Jan, I was thinking about following up with you, because I've been thinking about this. So one thing I want to tell you is that you can still see these 500 kilowatt group net metering projects up until the end of this year. So the new law doesn't kick in until the beginning of the year. I expect that something will come out, some programs will come out. There's a Solar for All program. There are programs that are coming out through the Department of Public Service. I don't think that you should take the, say, the 150 to 500 kilowatt possible sites off the table, but it won't look the same in terms of the monetary incentives. It'll be different. It won't be the high priced net metering rates. It may be through some other program. So what I was thinking was that you, the way you're looking at this is, okay, we just talked about residential solar. That's something that if you look at, there is a map that shows where it is all in Norwich. You guys have a lot of residential solar.
Yeah.
And then you can think about, are there any sites for the 150 to 500, not as part of the net metering program, but just that's the next sort of block, and then the larger sites that you have been focused on more. So I think it's all of those
Is
are.
it, yeah,
I will-
okay, so that's good. So what you're saying is that for the 150 to 500s, they may have different incentives coming up, right? Like they have commercial limitations, they have commercial weaknesses because of the size, but they may have incentives that help them. So they
There are
still
new
be viable.
programs at the Department of Public Service that aren't really fully baked yet, but and I don't think anyone knows what it looks like. I don't know if legislation will be required. I know that the utilities do not want any more of those size projects at that high net metering price, but there is all this money
Right,
that's
right.
come into the state. So I don't want to mislead you by saying don't look at those. I think
Yeah.
you need to like bracket into those different categories.
Okay, so that's useful. And the one question I would then have, and then we can just go to basically the commercial size ones that I looked at, is how does a project like a 200 or 300 kW project relate to the need for three-phase power? Can you do up to a 500 without three-phase power? Because you'll see in the way I step through this, three-phase power immediately knocks out the 3/4 of our town and makes the exercise way simpler.
I think in general, they still need the three-phase power.
Okay.
And or maybe some other transformer upgrades. I mean, there's all these distribution upgrades that really are kind of circuit by circuit. I think you guys have substations that can handle it, but at a certain point, those also become a factor.
From what I could tell on the Green Mountain Power stuff and it's the Wilder substation, and it has considerable capacity. Okay, so it's a good thing to say, all right, that block of 150 to 500 still needs its own considerations.
Yeah, I mean, there is clearly a desire, and I will even say a need for those people who cannot site solar on their own properties, or for the low income or apartments or housing complexes to do something. That's what the Department of Public Services mandate was from the legislature. Look at low income and impacted communities for community net metering. So instead of calling it group net metering, we'll call it community net metering. And there's still a desire for that. That may come back through the legislature, but again,
Okay.
they're gonna have to figure out how to pay for it.
Okay. All right. That's good. That's good context. So my focus was on then saying, all right, with those arguments that, okay, what can we do bigger than 500? And then I stepped through, being lazy, I stepped through the largest constraints first and took it down from there. The largest one easily being three-phase power. The presence of three-phase power. Now in Norwich right now, three-phase power goes out Beaver Meadow Road to the Catholic Church, that first bridge there. It goes out Main Street until the bottom of Willie Hill. And then it goes from Route 5 south, and actually not Route 5 Church Street, but River Road, and then all the way to Farrell Farms Road going north. So that is those are the boundaries of three-phase power in Norwich. And so if you just step through those quickly, because there's no point in looking out Turnpike Road towards Guile Mountain or something. You know, not only do you have priority forest blocks, but you don't have three-phase power. So any one of those limitations is enough. If you look in the in-town sites, it's pretty easy to see that in terms of scenic or out of character with the, you're not going to plop a sizable array in Huntley Meadows, we could probably stretch up to the Van Arman farm from the Willie Hill three-phase power, but I'm pretty sure we're not going to want to do that. So any of that in-town accessible three-phase power it just doesn't make it in terms of scenic and character. So then you go to Route 5 south, say, And I would, at least at first blush, I would argue that there are going to be commercial housing, anywhere near the Hartford line with potential connection to septic is going to have housing uses that are stronger than PV. You have the entire Monshire property that has three-phase power, but there's no way. There are two parking lots that are big enough to be worth talking about. The Monshire Museum and King Arthur Flower. They are both about 2 acres, 2.5 acres. And so you could do something on either of those. I think it's more expensive based on needing a canopy and so forth to have it still be a parking lot. But the Huntley Meadow parking lot isn't big enough to really be worth putting a canopy on. But King Arthur and Monshire you could think about. If you then go to Route 5 South, that's Route 5 South, which it's got some ag, but it's really got, I think, other uses, and it's also very visible. And then you have the Monshire that cuts it off, you have farmers market, and you have a housing opportunities. If you start going north on Route 5, and this is really the punchline, there are at least 3 former gravel pits, depending how you want to call Leonard Cook's previous establishment. And they're in a line because they're all tapping into the same glacial esker soils that put the gravel there. And it's basically the old Cook site. The Farrell Farms gravel pit behind the town well has a solar array in the south half of it, but the north half of it still looks open, and it's a former gravel pit. And then the Pompey Farms is actually a sizable former gravel pit, and I'm not sure if he's still operating, but that is a big site that is a gravel pit that is just at the tip of our three-phase power before you get to Pompey. And if you just do a Google Earth, here's the border of the gravel pit, you have a couple of those. There are 3 of them that are in the 10 to 15 acre site, 10, 13 acres, 8 acres, 15 acres, that of those sites. So that's sort of the narrative version of where I got to. And that's part of the reason why I think prohibiting 500 kW or above 500 kW to me seems premature if I've got at least a couple of sites that could host something larger than that.
All right, Paul. Or Arnie, sorry, first. Sorry, Ernie.
Just real quick, and one of those, the Pompey Farms gravel pit, they've been looking at selling that for a long time, so it actually is an opportunity for almost anybody to grab when they're ready.
Well, and the flip side of that is that means that conceivably a solar developer could grab it, and we need to be in a place where we're saying how the town feels about that.
Yeah.
Because they would be a preferred site without us saying a word about it if it's a former gravel pit.
Yes, and it matches the preferred sites right in the new definition. Okay.
Oh,
Yeah, just for comparison, on Route 5 going north, I think it's the King Arthur Flower solar project. How big is that compared to what you're talking about now?
Which I'm not sure which one you mean. We have
So it's where on Route 5 there is the the farm on the left going out of town. It used to be, and then there's just above that is where the old ski rental place was. No, not the ski, the
Right.
electric
That's
bikes.
Puppy Farms.
Yeah, yeah, you're, no, before Pompey Farms. He's talking about the gravel pit right behind the town well.
Yeah,
Um,
so it's now now a solar farm. Or
half,
solar.
that was my point. It's actually half a solar farm. If you look on Google Earth, it's clear that the south half of that gravel pit, and I did the acreage of it. I can pull it up and see. It was in the 3 to 5. It might have been 500. It wasn't bigger than 500, but it was, and it looks to only be a portion of the footprint of the gravel pit.
Okay,
But yeah,
Thank
that
you.
one's right behind the town garage. I mean, town well.
Right,
And
thank you.
clearly it's permittable that close to the town well. Again, that's kind of the industrial point. You
Mhm.
could put PV that close to the town well. You wouldn't be able to put any other industrial use that close to the town well.
Gotcha, thank you.
So what are you gonna do with your map, Jan? You gonna share it with anybody?
Definitely not. Well, that's my
Oh,
question to the,
Go
that's
ahead.
my
John.
question to the
Share it.
group. That's my question, because there's
We
another.
won't yell at you. We won't
Yeah.
yell at.
We won't
Well,
take a screenshot, no,
Yeah,
Jan,
yeah,
and put it
yeah.
in the
We'll keep
paper.
Exactly.
We won't do
I
that,
can-
we
We'll
promise.
keep it under
No.
wrap.
Well, and as I was doing the exercise, I mean, I did like along it's Lower Loveland Road. There's actually quite a few big fields that are, and again, you can look at the constraint maps. The state constraint maps have prime ag on there, and so I did a few like little skinny ones along the edges of fields where you could get an acre or two that weren't just plopped down in the middle of the field. So there is possibility, but again, I would not have felt comfortable just throwing that map out for all to see and have people say, wait a minute, this is, that's crazy, this is prime ag and so forth. But that's my question to the group. How do you want to proceed on this exercise?
What Sudbury did when they were looking at trying to find good sites was somebody actually went around and talked to all the landowners that they thought might be good. So that's my next question is, do you want to go talk to those quarry and pit owners and see how they would feel about it? I mean, one of the issues has always been, are they, if you do this mapping exercise, are you going to put my property on this map? So wouldn't you want to, now that you've identified some potential sites, wouldn't you want to talk to the landowners?
Yeah. Just to answer Paul's question, the existing town well array looks to be about 2.7 acres of arrays. So I would guess that's a 500 kW installation.
Thank you.
Steven,
Just following on Annette's suggestion, I think I'm 100% behind that. I think always talking to the folks is a good plan, and I'm willing to facilitate that if possible.
thank you. Mary,
I think it's a really constructive thing that you've done, Jan. I really appreciate that you're trying to find a place where it can be rather than just saying it can't be, at any one of these places. And if and when you talk to landowners, I ask that you send people along who will be level-minded. It's not you're out there with your torch to cause concern and stuff like that. Let's really think about who gets sent and how they talk to those landowners. So don't poison the well. But I really like.
And I think also, like, how broadly do you do it? Because like I said, there are 3 that are former gravel pits. One of them I just looked is 17 acres that looks potential. But then there are these sites still along Three Phase Power that are clearly you know, more residential and where do you draw the line? Where do you say we're not going to go talk to those people? Or do you somehow publish something that says you could just publish the 3-phase limitations and then quickly say, this is why the in-town stuff on 3-phase is not viable. That leaves this. And, you know, the committee or the planning commission or the energy committee is feeling, you know, would like to talk to homeowners, landowners in that swath of property, you know, and then there are 2, 3, 4 of them that are worth a particular visit. And you kind of have to do both.
I think you do want to talk to the landowners, and I would hope that you'd have the energy committee talk to them, somebody on there. Solar, I mean, whether you're talking about solar or what you're installing, it's always best to talk to the people who are close to that, get them on your side. And I just ask that the side you get them on is the side that is pro solar.
Well, that's the exercise we're doing here. I mean, this is a subset of the entire exercise, and it's listed in the summary here, where we are then looking for places where it is appropriate. So that's the exercise. You're trying at this stage, that type of exercise is a make it work exercise. How can we make it work is the going in question. And given all the constraints, I do think, for example, and I meant to ask Linda this, but whether anybody specifically has asked the Monshire about putting up a canopy over have they ever looked at coating the parking lot? I don't know. But that would be on the list.
Okay. Well, thanks. We'll take all that good advice into, consideration as we think about the next steps. Okay, get back to my agenda. Any other comments about the mapping? Thank you, Jan, for doing it, first of all, and for giving so much thought to it. So next steps, I think the next steps, as we've talked about, are going to be taking it to the Planning Commission and having a discussion there after some edits, and then having discussion there, and then taking it to additional commissions, committees in town for their input. We'll work with Stephen to do that, and then bring that feedback back to the Planning Commission, I would expect. And then take the steps towards making the actual changes. I don't know what the timeline is on that, but we can think about that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're at the time to approve the minutes of the last meeting. Just trying to get to them. Ernie, you want to give me a proposal? We do that? So move. Oh, you're on mute, Ernie. I can't hear you.
Read lips.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of the last
Second.
meeting.
Okay.
Second, so that's October 15th. Yeah.
October 15th. Okay. All approved. Say aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. Any additional business?
No. So you'll submit, and right now the regular PC meeting will be December 10th.
December 10th.
That-
Okay.
that would
So
be-
that's due what, the week earlier than December 10th?
It would be the Wednesday. To be nice to Pam, it's Wednesday the 4th.
December 4th.
To
Okay.
put something in.
Roger that.
Any packet materials, and then to tell me to get an agenda item for it.
Okay. Terrific.
And what about,
Thanks, all.
do we want to think about our next solar siting meeting?
Yeah, what should we set a date for that right now? Let's see if the planning commission's, I mean, the planning commission's meeting on the 4th.
10th.
No, the 10th. Okay, sorry, the 10th.
I mean, the natural progression,
Yes.
of what we've
Yeah.
been doing would be the
Then the
17th.
17th,
That's okay.
17th, Tuesday, the 17th. Okay, great.
And we
6:30 or 7?
It'd be at 6.
Ernie
6:30.
was right on the ball. He was here at 6.
I know,
Ready
sorry.
to go.
I wasn't on the ball because I didn't see that one little piece of the.
They were clearly urgent to get into this.
All right. 6:30 on the 17th. All
All
right,
right.
great.
I'll put that in.
Thanks. Okay,
Motion
thanks.
to
Bye-bye.
adjourn.
Okay,
Okay.
so do.
Thank you all.
Seconded. Okay.